Cartethyia's kit has officially been revealed for Wuthering Waves, but after the massive announcement of 6 new playable characters coming, a lot of people are wondering if pulling for Cartethyia is actually a good idea or not. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I'm going to give Cartethyia's biggest pros and cons, and then you can decide whether it's worth it to pull for or not. First of all, Cartethyia is a Sentinel Resonator, and what does that mean? Well, it means that she's almost guaranteed to make a massive impression on the game's balance. Remember when Jinshi came out in version 1.1 and she completely dominated the meta until Carlotta's release? Yeah, I'm expecting a similar thing here with Cartethyia. Being a Sentinel Resonator means that you are obviously going to have a massive impact on the game. And with Cartethyia being revealed as a main DPS, this means that Cartethyia is most likely going to be a minimum of a top 3 DPS in the game, with potential to be the best one there is. Sentinel Resonators simply just have such a massive impact on the game, and we know it's intentional. After all, something that both Cartethyia and Jinshi have in common is that they got a story teaser, something that no other character has gotten. So it's obvious that Kuro wants to market the Sentinel Resonator as much as possible, and this is also going to involve them being incredibly powerful. This is also paired with the fact that, from what we've seen of her animations, she seems to have good AoE under her belt too. AoE in wuwa has a history of not really being that relevant, but all of that changed in 2.1 when they added the Whimpering Wastes game mode, a game mode all about AoE and multi-wave, meaning that AoE and multi-wave are now officially incredibly important aspects to have as a main DPS. Cartethyia seems to have very reasonable AoE on all of her abilities, seemingly comparable to Zani, if not better. Not only are Cartethia's skill and plunge, as well as Fleur-de-Lis's skill, incredibly large in terms of size, we also get to see a very large amount of AoE coming from most of Cartethia's basic attacks, meaning that if you're fighting Whimpering Wastes, there's a very high chance you'll be able to hit almost every enemy, if not every single one of them. This means that wave wiping will be a lot easier with Cartethyia than with someone like Calcharo, for example. AoE is also very useful in tower, despite it being especially relevant within Whimpering Wastes. This is because even in tower, you will have waves of enemies before the boss on certain chambers, mainly being the boss on the left tower, as well as the second stage of the middle tower. And usually, these enemy waves are either a large collection of enemies in one wave, or 2 waves of a pretty decently sized enemy. So even in tower, having good AoE is actually pretty relevant. Another good benefit is that if you're looking for an Aero DPS, Cartethyia at her maximum potential is going to be the best choice for you. I cannot say much about other Aero DPSs considering we only really have one other good example, being GN. And GN is already a good character. He is one of the best DPSs for Whimpering Wastes, as well as being pretty good for tower. But Cartethyia is most likely simply going to blow his damage output out of the water. But why exactly do you want to have an Aero DPS? While there is no reason to specifically get an Aero damage dealer, it's still a very good idea to diversify your roster when it comes to elements. This is because of the way tower handles elements, especially on the middle tower. You see, on the left and right towers, it will lower the resistance of a specific element to try and get you to use that element. And in middle tower, not only will it decrease the resistance of 2 elements, it will also increase the resistance of 2 elements, meaning that you want to have a pretty decent collection of multiple different element types on your roster. For example, if you were to put all of your eggs into the Spectro basket, trying to play Phoebe, Zani, and Jinshi as your 3 main carries, you are going to be entirely cooked the second we see tower with Spectral resistance on a Spectral resistant boss. Because, yes, even the best DPSs will start struggling to clear if the content just completely counters them. So this is why having a varied collection of elements within your roster is actually relevant towards your ability to clear the game with ease. Now let's start looking at some negatives to Cartethyia, because she does have some. I think her biggest one by far is the fact that Ciaccona is going to be an incredibly integral part to Cartethia's performance. Cartethyia is an air erosion based character, so obviously she wants air erosion to be on the enemies. And while Cartethyia is capable of applying her own aero erosion, primarily on her basics as well as her intro skill, it's really not that much. Especially when you look at multi-wave, where you want constant area erosion application, but I'll get more into that later. You see, the reason that area erosion application is actually so relevant towards Cartethyia is because in her Fleur-de-Lis form, she will actually be buffing area erosion by quite a significant amount, so the amount of area erosion that's on the enemy is actually relevant. She also consumes area erosion with her attacks, making them apply instantly, which means that you're going to need even higher area erosion application, especially when you realize that her finishing move, aka a very large contributor towards her overall damage output, does actually consume area erosion as well to increase its own damage, up to 5 stacks. And there really is only one way to get those 5 stacks on enemies in order to get the max bonus, and that is with Ciaccona. Cartethyia does not apply enough erosion on her own in order to maintain that amount of stacks, and thus Ciaccona is going to be an integral part to Cartethyia's overall team, and skipping Ciaccona in order to get Cartethyia is just not that good of an idea. Additionally, she will also take away Rover from your other teams. Now, normally I would think that using Rover is not that big of a downside. You see, Rover is literally free, so why would using Rover be considered a downside? Well, it's because Spectral Rover, it's just actually a good character now. Spectral Frazzle is a pretty valuable effect to apply, considering that 2 of the best DPS characters in the game, being Phoebe and Zani, both really rely on its application in order to function. And currently there's only 3 characters in the game that are capable of applying Spectral Frazzle in an actually good amount, being Phoebe herself, Ciaccona, and Spectral Rover. And with Cartethyia taking both Ciaccona and Spectral Rover, you are left with only Phoebe to apply Frazzle. But what if you want to play DPS Phoebe? Or what if you have Zani but you didn't end up getting Phoebe and have been relying on Rover to apply your Frazzle? Cartethyia just makes you unable to run these teams. So if you want to run Zani and Cartethyia at the same time, both of which being incredible DPS characters, you are forced to pull both of their full premium teams, which can be very expensive, and a lot of people just simply haven't been able to do that. And then finally, there's one more complaint that I have about Cartethyia, but it's more of a nitpick than an actual con, being the fact that she does lose some performance in multi-wave. As I said earlier, Cartethyia actually does buff area erosion, and she consumes area erosion to make it deal damage immediately. This means that the amount of stacks of area erosion that are on the enemies is actually relevant to Cartethyia's damage output, which is not the case for Zani and Phoebe. And because Ciaccona actually takes quite a bit of time to apply her area erosion stacks, chances are you're not going to be able to reap the full benefits from Cartethyia's area erosion buffing. Although I call this more of a nitpick for a reason, being the fact that in most multi-wave content, aka primarily Whimpering Wastes, there's a very high chance that you're just gonna kill the enemy anyway. But even despite that, while it's not exactly a must to have maximum area erosion stacks on the enemy, it is actually a very nice benefit that does boost Cartethyia's damage by quite a bit. But those are just my thoughts on Cartethyia. What do you think about her? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord, which is linked in the description below. I'm pretty active in there, so if you ask your questions, there's a pretty good chance I'll respond. But that'll be it from me. Peace.